Hello, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to day 2 of our virtual workshop, a discussion on research and a multidisciplinary response to sexual assault. My name is Tyler Rabel, and I will be your virtual host for today's event. As a reminder, the opinions, findings, conclusions, and/or recommendations expressed in this workshop are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect those of the Department of Justice. Thank you for your attention, and I'm going to pass the virtual platform over to Matthew.
Thanks, Tyler. We appreciate all of you joining with us again for day 2 of this peer-to-peer event. We had over 200 attendees yesterday, unique attendees yesterday, and we have great attendance today. We're happy to have you with us. And we want to share with you today some of the things that are going on at Idaho State Police Forensic Services related to research and participating with researchers. So we hope that you'll learn something today as you're attending about what we're doing with research to address sexual assault in our country. Today, we wanted to introduce you to some of our friends, some of our research partners, and what we'll do is we'll bring them in throughout the day to talk to you and give presentations. But I wanted to start today about giving you a little introduction to what we do with these researchers here at Idaho State Police Forensic Services. So just as an introduction to Idaho State Police Forensic Services, we do have 3 forensic laboratories, one in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, one in Meridian, Idaho, and one in Pocatello, Idaho. We have several values that we put up, and I want to highlight the ones in red today, specifically transparency, a customer focus, using responsible government, and accountability. These are all values that we have. These are all things that we do for our customers, and these are all things that we are responsible for to the citizens of the state of Idaho. And all of you, I'm assuming, similarly have responsibilities like this to your customers. We have many research partners that we've set up informal and formal relationships with. These relationships are shown on the screen now. These are formal relationships that we have, MOUs in many places to provide data to these research partners so that they can share back with us what they're learning from our data. The benefits of participating with researchers are, first, we have peer-reviewed publications coming out of this. You'll hear today from Dr. Bostaff, Dr. Valentine, and Dr. Speaker, who have all published on data that they have gleaned from Idaho State Police Forensic Services and others. We also drive a culture of data-driven decisions. We have many examples in our state where decisions are now being made based on data rather than just hearsay. One such is the non-submitted kit data that we had historically. So we knew that law enforcement were not submitting certain kits, but we didn't know why. And so as we collected the data, we were able to determine why they were making certain decisions and then make legislation and policy decisions that helped to fix this issue. We also had an issue recently with retention of medical records. We recognize that in our state statute, we have a 10-year or 55-year retention on the kits, but we don't have any kind of retention law or policy on the books in Idaho to require the medical records to be kept. And so based on our survey data and based on our research, we are changing that practice. We also feed back mechanisms into practice. So for example, Julie Valentine will talk today a little bit about some research that she's done on dating apps and our data, what our data is showing related to dating apps. And so that is being fed back into real-time practice with our statewide working group to be able to shape decision-making there and also to work on certain areas. We also are testing all swabs, which Julie will talk about in our sexual assault kits. And that was something that came out of this data that we were looking at and evaluating the data that we were seeing. The biggest one, though, I think, is public trust. We have a lot of transparency. We provide a lot of things on our website, on our kit tracking system, and that creates a positive public presence for our customers and also for our constituency. Some of the considerations that we've had to focus on are data sharing. As we've gone to share data with researchers, we've recognized that there are security concerns in doing so. We have to bring them in. We have to background check them if they're going to be here on site. We have to focus on, is this going to be an exchange of data or an export of data? And what can we give on an export of data that's going outside of our laboratory? We have to focus on automatic processes versus manual processes. Are we able to share, like through NIFLS, just share our data through our electronic data systems, or does that have to be a manual process where we export a spreadsheet? What's the frequency of those data pulls? Monthly, quarterly, annually? That all takes resources to be able to provide. And then also, what is the data available, or the process, and what does the database need? What do we have to have? So are we capturing more data? Do we need to capture more data? How do we capture that data? And then we're constantly faced with software changes. So as manufacturers upgrade their software, we have to change and modify what we're doing. Now, there is some concern that we've come up with when we are giving researchers direct access to our data. We have to have a formal MOU that's signed by our legal departments, both from us and from the other side, from the university or from the research partner. We have to worry about background checks for some of these individuals. And in some cases, students have an issue with passing these background checks. We have to fight with CJIS security policy, meaning we have to have them do training specifically to be able to access CJIS related data. And then we have to give them training if we're going to allow them direct access into our laboratory software or databases. We have to work with them to teach them how those work. And then again, we have to have our lab staff committed to monitor these individuals, train them, and also assist them with any data that they need to pull. This is a collaboration, to be for sure. And as we start looking at our internal processes, we have to work with our IT department, our financial services, our human resources. All these are considerations in bringing in someone to work with us on research. We also have to involve our LIMS administrator and other database administrators. We have to sometimes change the way we're collecting data or adding data fields to our LIMS system to be able to collect all this data. We also have to communicate well. Our lab and IT researchers don't often, lab and IT and researchers don't often communicate in the same language. Coding means very different things to the lab staff, the research staff, and my IT staff. For IT staff, that means coming up with a program. But to a researcher, it means querying data and getting data points. Trying to interpret what data is needed between the researchers and the lab can also be challenging. Sometimes we have an interpretation of what they need, and what they actually need is much different. So the communication becomes critical. And then phone and email, which is what we have to deal with a lot of times, especially in the COVID environment, makes communication very challenging with the researchers to provide them what they need. We also have to have technical expertise. Often it's not easy to query the databases for the information that they need and develop these crystal reports and query tools that we need to be able to work with these researchers. One of the projects I'll highlight today, and which Paul Speaker will talk about later, is Project Foresight. Project Foresight for us is it's a National Institute of Justice and West Virginia University project. It's voluntary, so we participate as a volunteer. We contribute our data in there. They have participating laboratories from metro, regional, state, national, and international agencies. They analyze the data from the crime labs, and they use that to be able to identify trends across the laboratories, and they monitor the performance of individual laboratories and compare them to each other. They make this data available to business and economics researchers all over the world to be able to publish and make presentations. They first worked on standardizing definitions in the functional areas of the laboratory, and now we have consistent terminology so that everyone's gathering and reporting the same data. The benefits for us, we are able to determine what our annual costs are, what our costs per case, what our costs per item and sample are. We're able to use that for court restitution estimates, for fiscal estimates for our legislature, to determine our budget allocation, and also to do some financial forecasting for what certain changes might have financially on the laboratory. There is an annual report that comes out of this. It compares us to other laboratories. It allows us to determine, are we operating at the right economy of scale? Are we efficient? Are we productive in what we're doing? And then it also allows us to collaborate with those other laboratories. When we find the most efficient laboratories, we're able to look at our processes and determine through Lean Six Sigma and other exercises how we can become more efficient and how we can collaborate better. We also are able to determine what our workforce issues are and how to reduce backlog. All of these things are fantastic, but one of the best tools is the workforce calculator. It allows me to tell our legislature and other policymakers how many employees we need based on national data supported by the National Institute of Justice. We also receive recognition when we are among the high producing and high efficiency laboratories. And then it also allows us to do better collaboration internally with our financial services and also our Department of Financial Management with the state. I'll breeze through a couple of these slides just to show you, and Paul will talk more about this, but the data tool to report is very simple. There are 168 labs currently participating from 242 separate facilities, and 19 non-US labs participate. Now for us, we look at areas like the ones you're seeing on the screen to determine how many cases are we doing a year and how many FTPs, full-time positions, or full-time equivalents that we have working in that area, scientists working in that area. We go through the financial reporting, how much we're spending per budget category. We monitor our finances very carefully, and we do this through individual budget categories for each discipline. We report things that the scientists are doing, things like going through and recording how many pills, what the weight of the pills, what color of things. All of these data points can be queried through our laboratory information management system. We also monitor our employees' performance on a daily basis. They report to us, takes them about 20 to 30 seconds to be able to report to us the tasks that they perform throughout the day, whether administrative, court, casework, or any other thing that they're working on, which allows us to query those data points and determine how much time we're spending on each activity in the laboratory. Ultimately, we're able to search all these things by how much time did we spend per county, per city, per agency, how much time did we spend working on blood alcohol. Then we're able to get a report from Project Foresight on an annual basis. They produce 54 unique tables of data that we're able to look at and 42 figures where we can compare ourselves with other laboratories in the country and in the world about how we're doing as compared to everyone else. The ultimate benefit is I can tell exactly how many employees I need, where I'm overstaffed, and I can be able to make determinations for staffing and other things in my laboratory that I need based on research data. One of the things I'm looking at right now is our cost per item. As we examine items in the laboratory, where are we as compared to everyone else? Where are we efficient? Where do we need to make some improvement? And so I look at these data points and I try and figure out why these data points look the way that they do for our laboratory. Well, what is the ultimate benefit of providing researchers with data, collaborating with researchers? This is one example that will be brief throughout the day, but I wanted to kind of cue it up for you early on today. The researchers out of Stanford, Wing and Ween, produced a bunch of data for us that comes from our data through Project Foresight. They looked at the cost savings to society. Now, we realize that there are real victims, real survivors in these cases, but there also is a societal cost that policymakers have to consider as they're making decisions about funding research, funding laboratory work. So in this case, the take-home value here was that they identified that the societal benefit is $133,671 per kit, or an 8,000% return on investment. That's spending $1,641 to test a kit avert sexual assaults costing approximately $133,000 on average. That's huge. And when you look at data coming out of Utah, which Julie Valentine will talk a little bit about, sexual violence costs $1,700 per resident per year in the state of Utah. This makes sense to policymakers and to legislators. Ultimately, the estimated lifetime cost of a rape in 2017 was estimated at $123,000 per victim. These are real costs that are having to be borne by our states and our legislators. Again, I don't want the focus to be just on the numbers, because that's one measure. We want the focus today to be about victims and about survivors of these crimes. We want to talk to you about how some of the research is really driving our approach to dealing with these issues in our state and in our country. I'm very excited for you to be able to learn from some of these researchers today. And we will first go to our first presenter.